Hello, and welcome to the special Christmas episode of Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 3 of Chobits. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Alright, so after last episode, we left off with Hideki learning that she is in all likelihood a Chobits, or an especially high-end custom-made Persicom. And as a result, she doesn't really need an operating system traditionally speaking, but she is supposedly capable of free will and a bunch of other interesting stuff. So at this point, Hideki is essentially responsible for, teaching her and helping her develop. And it seems like Hideki is in the unenviable position of a student where, he's got to pay bills and all sorts of stuff. And, man, that's a real rough position where you don't have a job, you're busy with schoolwork, supposedly, and your meager savings are going to get eaten up rapidly. And I guess maybe Chi doesn't need much of anything, really. But, you do have to spend time taking care of her. And I guess Hideki, he also wants to have something of a social life, too. He does have, maybe not friends, but, people who are, friendly with him. Yeah, so he's going to, that prep school class. The question is, does he just leave Chi alone? Because I feel like there's probably not too much trouble she can get into, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's remarkable that she's taking to spoken words so quickly, but I feel like if she's able to learn something like that so quickly, she's also probably able to start causing trouble quickly. I mean, God forbid, what if she picks up a fork and gets curious about a power socket? That's gonna be real bad. Ooh, okay. Yeah, so she doesn't really grasp it, I suppose. I was going to say, that is interesting how quickly she picks things up, but, baby steps, I suppose. You can't learn a whole entire language overnight, especially when you don't speak one to begin with. So, as always, the landlord is remarkably nice to him, which I guess is indicative of her being a good person, but I'm wondering if she's going to, at some point, be drafted to help take care of Chi. Because I feel like with Hideki just leaving her alone on a daily basis. You know, as a landlord, I would be concerned, if not necessarily for the sake of the Persicom, but for the sake of my property, you know? And, you know, I guess everything takes an extra wrinkle when you consider that she is, you know, allegedly self-aware or is possessing of free will. Because, like, it'd be one thing if she were just a Persicom with no sentience or sapience or anything like that. You know, it's not like she's any great brain trust right now, but I don't know. It's a really sticky situation where if you don't take care of the fundamentals, things will get really unethical really quickly. So it's interesting that Hideki's sort of thinking down on the learning software because, like, you know, if she can learn on her own, that's a remarkable thing, especially for a machine. You know, I think it's just he's disappointed he's going to have to do the teaching and that, you know, he didn't make all sorts of progress in the literal first 5 minutes. Okay, so Sumomo was actually, like, damaged by interfacing with Chi. That's incredibly unfortunate, because, like, I thought it was almost like a comedy bit. You know, Chi's so powerful she fries everything she touches, but, you know, that there was actual damage is concerning. Especially considering, like, the body count got up to, like, half a dozen between Sumomo and, that specialist's Chobits. Man, you know, if his financial situation weren't bad enough, it just suddenly got worse. Oh dear. Yeah, you know, if I know anything about computer parts, it's that they generally aren't cheap. Man, you know, something tells me she's going to, not necessarily go for, like, the low-end parts either. You know, it's like, oh boy, these are the replacement parts, here's what they cost, it's 5 figures. Oh dear. Ooh. Okay, that's a little interesting thing, that Persicoms can be upgraded with parts and software. I guess that makes sense if they're effectively computers, but something tells me that will not be the case with Chi. Or at the very least, you know, it would take something highly specialized. Something tells me not just any part off the shelf is going to be compatible with whatever she's got. Okay, so she's like a multi-subject teacher, which is interesting, and that's kind of a wide spread of subjects, being literature, math, and foreign languages. Yeah, you know, it is interesting. It's rather unfortunate that a teacher is stuck teaching effectively adults when she wants to teach elementary school. Like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like the formality of roll call is kind of unnecessary. You know, like, once you get past compulsory education, I feel like, you know, you should want to be at school, and therefore, roll call is not necessary. You know, like, if you're paying for school, it should be your responsibility to show up and take care of all that. Yeah, you know, I'm wondering if maybe this isn't the root of the issue. You know, maybe the reason he flunked out of college, or rather failed the entrance exam, is because he's too busy daydreaming about, you know, these sort of far-off possibilities, like what if he had her as an elementary school teacher? You know, his imagination is probably a little too active for his own good. I mean, at least he's got the sort of diligence where he's actively hunting for a job to try and make money. Man, he really does need to, watch out. He does have a tendency to spout off in public, and he probably shouldn't be doing that. I get the feeling that maybe if he does get a job, it may not last very long for this very reason. So I guess the question is, what sort of job would he get? Like, I guess, if he's going to a pub, it'll be sort of like, a waiter job or a line cook or something like that. I take that back, he was too late. But, you know, that sort of work would probably be good for him. You know, that sort of entry-level kind of thing. Man. This feels like it was ripped right from the headlines today. You know, everybody isn't really hiring anymore, despite having listings. You know, on the one hand, it's unfortunate that he wasn't able to get a job, but on the other hand, it's only the first day. And I recognize that he's operating off of savings here, but, you know, one day probably isn't going to make or break you. Ooh. Wow, that's something. I feel like this girl's a bit of a match for Hideki to sort of absent-mindedly splash water around like that. Well, you never know. Maybe it's, for the best. They might have a job. You never know. I mean, weirder things have happened, right? You know, I don't think it's much of a coincidence that she just sort of gave him a uniform to borrow as if he were an employee. So I guess the question is, like, what's going to happen from here? I feel like the boss is going to walk in and say, like, hey, get back to work, dude. And, you know, just like that, he's going to have a job. It probably doesn't help that he's fantasizing about the girl, you know. I feel like that sort of thing would just attract the boss to come down on you. It's also telling that he's fantasizing about this girl after having interacted with her for all of 30 seconds. Ooh. Okay, so it's probably not the boss asking. Alright, so here we go. You know, Hideki, just because he's a good guy, he's going to help. Alright, so this is interesting. You know, Persicom interfacing with the register and running it that way. That's interesting, because I guess that would probably be a good use of a Persicom, seeing as how you just have to crunch numbers and all that. Wow. You know, it is pretty nice that he doesn't even really have to come up with an excuse. I mean, I guess he does, but nobody really seems to care. Yeah, okay, so just like that, you know, he effectively has a job. He's not really on the clock, and he's not really getting paid for it, but I guess this speaks to his character, that he's willing to help out strangers, essentially. You know, I feel like this sort of thing would earn a bit of gratitude from the owner. I mean, the other guy's saying, like, hey, he's a good worker. And, no doubt the boss is wondering, who is this new guy, but, man, Hideki just talks to the boss like, oh yeah, hey, how can I help you? Ooh, okay, so there is a new part-time guy and they assume it's him. So, the question is, like, is Hideki just out of another potential job, or, do they hire him in place of the other guy? Like, that would really suck if you got a job and then some guy beat you to it just by showing up and working in your stead. I guess that'd be a little funny in a weird sort of way. You know, it's interesting that the guy is asking him, it's like, hey, how do you like the clothes? As if that's relevant for being an employee. I feel like liking the uniform is sort of immaterial unless it's really tasteless. So I guess things worked out, you know? He gets a job, he gets to hang out with that cute girl. But, I don't know. I guess it's interesting that he's made new friends and gotten employment and all that, but I guess by necessity he'll have to leave Chi alone for a whole lot longer now. You know, that is another thing, actually. We haven't seen the other shoe drop yet, because I feel like she, despite dubbing everything in the apartment Hideki, you know, I get the feeling she's gonna cause some sort of a problem. And I guess more to the point, Hideki likely doesn't have a resume. You know, sure, he agreed to deliver one, but something tells me he hasn't written one, and even if he did sit down to write it, he probably doesn't have much to fill it out. Okay, so this girl is sort of like treating him as normal for having a Persicom, which I guess makes sense if they're effectively computers, but I would feel like if you were just talking to a random girl and you just sort of dropped the information that you have a Persicom, that would be sort of grounds for like a weird look, you know? Oh wow. That's a really little thing. So that's interesting. You know, I didn't realize they got quite that small. I thought Sumoma was sort of like the small end of Persicoms. Because, like, that thing's effectively a keychain. Oh, here we go. Yep, never written a resume before. Man. I mean, like, knowing what I know, you can spoof a resume pretty quickly with mundane activities. You know, saying he helped his parents out on the farm, that proves, you know, diligence and stuff like that. But, like, writing a resume for the first time, like, that's something I would never want to do ever again. Yeah, so it seems like there's like a standard template for resumes, which is nice, you know. They have like a form they want you to use. So I guess that sort of simplifies things, but man. Like just sort of having to write a resume out of the blue, like that's the stuff of nightmares. I mean, I guess the boss did say it's a formality. You don't have to worry about getting the job, you basically have it, but well, yeah, I guess that does alleviate most of it, because, like, having to write a resume with resume speak and all that, I really do not enjoy it. Ooh, buddy. Hideki, man, you gotta stop thinking about those sights, dude. Poor guy's probably a little too honest for his own good, you know? This is a co-worker after all, and the daughter of the owner. It might behoove him to just, restrain himself a little bit. So I guess magically the apartment doesn't seem destroyed yet. And I guess it is nice that she's happy to see him, you know. Alright, well, that's progress, I suppose. She remembers the phrase and all that, but, she's sort of misapplying it. I don't think Hideki's really taking into account just how quickly she's learning. Maybe she doesn't quite understand the meaning of the words, but to be able to pick them up so quickly, that's not nothing, you know? Yeah, he's asking some real abstract questions, and I feel like he's gonna have to teach her the basics. Okay, so she's clearly got some degree of intelligence. She says she doesn't understand, which is, that's kind of a complex thought if you really don't know much language. Yeah, I really don't think he's giving her enough credit for picking up all these words and phrases and sort of using them correctly. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe she doesn't understand as much as I was giving her credit for, but, this is what, day one? I'd say this is solid progress for one day. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. Merry Christmas, Space Cowboy.